What's up, guys? Gunn here. Happy NFL Week 6. It is Sunday, October 18th, 2020. I hope this video finds you well. Hopefully better than I am. I'm actually a little bit under the weather. I was really hoping to get this video. I was actually hoping to live stream yesterday, but I've been really sick since I woke up yesterday. So I'm going to do my best to fake it here and not sound all stuffy and coffee. But I definitely would have felt bad if I didn't get some type of video up for this week. You guys make it a point to reach out to me every week for some content. So I'm very humbled that you guys do look for my spins and stuff like that. I did just finish up all my notes and projections and ownership projections, all that good stuff for the Week 6 slate. So if you guys want access to that, spreadsheet is up live waiting for you guys at rundfs.com. It's behind the premium paywall. Go to rundfs.com, make yourself an account, grab yourself a week pass. $20 will get you in there for the full week. And that'll get you 24/7 access to the rundfs.com VIP Discord, and you guys can reach out to me. I got a lot more free time over the course of the next couple months to maybe do some more hands-on coaching for anybody that feels like they need it, and definitely fielding suggestions. You guys that are premium members of the YouTube channel, check out the community post. I've been asking to see where you guys might want some guidance or some help with in certain areas. I definitely have a lot of time to record some more tutorials and stuff like that, so look out for that. And then, of course, if you join VIP, hit me up. Oh, man, I hope my voice keeps it together. It is rough. But, yeah, I hope you guys are doing well out there, man. I miss not being able to really put out daily content because I don't have daily DFS to go out there and tackle. So if you guys do miss me, you want to hang out with me a little bit more, I'm always on Twitch, streaming Fortnite, stuff like that. I would love to catch up with some of you guys, twitch.tv/Gundacker99. Anyway, for this video, we're going to chop up the slate real quick. I'm not really going to dive in depth on each game, stuff like that. You guys are used to that. I'm just going to, real quick, after doing my notes, kind of let you guys know where I'm at on each game. So, Baltimore, Philadelphia. This is a game that I'm really just going to have the Baltimore side. If we look at the game total for this one, over at the Vegas tab at Fantasy Labs, we'll find that this total right now is at 46. It was at 48.5. Has gone down a little bit. Obviously, the money on the Ravens. Ravens are -10, so I'm probably walking away from this game with Ravens defense. And then, of course, my favorite handcuff would be Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews. And this could be one of those, I don't want to say sneaky Lamar Jackson spots, right? But I think a lot of people, when you click Lamar Jackson's name, that far right column isn't that appealing based on his price, right? One of the most expensive players on each site, 7,700. So you're really looking for that 30 DKP. I could see him having some suppressed ownership because of which. So I love Lamar to Mark Andrews. If I go look at the defense versus position tab in the rundfs.com VIP spreadsheet, we'll find that the Eagles actually give up the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends and 5 touchdowns on the year. So great spot for Mark Andrews, great spot for Lamar Jackson. And if I had to get somewhere in the middle with Ravens, obviously it's Marquise Brown, 6,500. But I like a lot of 6K receivers this week. 10 targets last week, 8 targets 2 weeks ago. That's always my Ravens player group is Lamar, Marquise, Mark Andrews. And then, of course, Ravens defense, right? Wide favorites. I usually prefer home favorite defenses, but this year I've been a little bit more relaxed. All right, next game, Bengals and the Colts here. I got no interest really for anyone on the Bengals side. I think the Bengals are in a tough matchup all the way around. Their offensive line doesn't match up well against the Colts defensive line, and it just seems like a really bad spot. So I'm not going to invest too much in the Bengals offense. They are 7.5-point underdogs here, just a 46-point total. The bulk of my interest here is going to be in the Colts, namely Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor has been a fantasy sweetheart in terms of name value. He's only 6,400. Likely could project him for 15 to 20 touches. If you look at his game log here, the carries are under 20. We saw that 1 week where he had like 20 touches at half, and then the next couple weeks just kind of fizzled down. Well, one of the reasons it has been kind of low is Jordan Wilkins. It's been a guy that's been 9 carries a game in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He did not practice Thursday or Friday. I think that's a good sign that he would be out, and that would pretty much narrow down this running back committee, theoretically, to Nahim, Heinz, and Jonathan Taylor. So I think at 6,400, we put Taylor in a game where he's on a team that's a touchdown favorite. It's good game script. It's good process. So I like him to do well. The last couple weeks, the Colts were down 23-32 last week. Just not a whole bunch of great spots. So Taylor's definitely not a cash game lock or anything like that for me, but he's probably the only player in this game I'll have, and then also have some Colts defense. Moving on to the Lions and the Jaguars. I got a lot of Lions here. I think looking at ownership projections, probably your trendiest quarterback receiver handcuff in all formats is likely going to be Matthew Stafford. I saw him projected to be the highest owned quarterback today. 30 plus pass attempts in just about every game this season. Schedule is kind of mediocre. He did have 3 passing touchdowns last week. We love that Kenny Golladay is back. A couple of those games there for Stafford's game log, Golladay was out. Since Galladay's come back, he's seen 7 and 8 targets, a touchdown in each game. Makes a lot of sense to be a quarterback wide receiver handcuff here. Also, don't hate the idea of TJ Hawkinson. He is 5,300 on DraftKings. Target share is mediocre at best, 474. But the Jaguars really reeling right now against tight ends. They have allowed, let's see, Jaguars have allowed 352 yards receiving to tight ends, 4 touchdowns. So the opportunity is there for him. So I do like that. And then obviously we would have some Marvin Jones thrown into the mix. On the Jaguars side, the receiving core for the Jaguars is just so unpredictable week to week. DJ Chark obviously seems like the more name value guy from the Jaguars offense. But a lot like last week against the Texans, the guy I'm leaning towards the most right now is James Robinson. He's 6.8K. Lots of reasons to get behind him. If this game could play more neutral, you could see upwards of 17 to 20 carries. But even if the game script gets away from the traditional north-south running back preference, he has been involved in the passing game. 7 targets last week, 4, 6. So at 6,800, I do think he has enough volume to be involved against a Lions defense that I can certainly get behind it running back wise. I think I wrote in my game notes here. I won't show you all the notes, but for let me put that on the other screen real quick. For Jerome Robinson specifically, if I Robinson specifically, Robinson. Oh, James. Why did I say Jerome? James Robinson sticks out again, like last week, as, quote, in a good spot, but also in a bad spot, depending on how competitive you think the Jaguars will be. He's a bet for 20-plus touches a game at this point, being under 7K on DraftKings, and though the lack of touchdowns held him back the last 2 weeks, the matchup remains strong. Detroit has allowed the 5th most rushing yards in the league, 5 rushing touchdowns, and have allowed the most yards per carry, 5.57, and the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And even when phased out of typical run-the-ball game script, Robinson has been involved in the passing game. None of the other Jags players have a high predictive value involvement, but Chark would probably be the guy I lean on as a more familiar name value guy. So my bad for butchering that a little bit, but James Robinson is the guy I kind of like here as a run back potentially for some of my Golladay shares and Hawkinson shares. I know it doesn't make sense to run back the running back that's an underdog here, but here we are. So I do have a hankering for some James Robinson. I'm not really exploring too much with the rest of the Jaguars pass catchers. You could make an individual case to me about Gardner Minshew, 20-plus fantasy points, 4 of his last 5 games. So I definitely think that's fair. I just don't I don't have the warm and fuzzies on a specific handcuff, and I actually feel that way with quite a few quarterbacks today. So I don't mind having some guys running naked in like single entries and stuff. But for the Lions, give me Stafford, Galladay, some Hawkinson, some Marvin. Moving on to the Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings. Real quick, we have a total of this one at 54. It's dropped 2.5 points since it opened. And the Vikings are 4-point favorites here. The big news here, Dalvin Cook out. Next man up is Alexander Madison, who is 7,200 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. I think on both sides, he's going to have extremely elevated ownership. I saw him projected as the highest owned player on both sides. So take that with a grain of salt. I appreciate that it's not one of these next man up must play value running backs because at 7,200 for me there is a range of outcomes where he's just an average play, right? If he got 19 fantasy points today, I think most people would just be happy, right? If you played him, you're fine. If you fade him, you're fine. So yeah, I think the matchup against the Falcons isn't as great as people think, but it's not something I'm running away from. I think the guy that kind of sticks out to me a little bit more, Adam Thielen without Dalvin Cook. If we look at Adam Thielen DKP by game log without Dalvin Cook, I'm going to put last 7 games. There's a lot of 26-plus fantasy point games. 26, 29, 32, 27, 27. And if you look at the last couple weeks, he's just been kind of clicking for this offense, even matching 29 in his last 2 games. So at 7,300, a lot of reason to get behind Thielen for double-digit targets against a Falcons secondary that Thielen can definitely get behind. And then if you really want to get down in the dumps, I've been punting Irv Smith at 2,500 on DraftKings. Saw 5 targets last week, but he's been pretty involved snap-wise. I just don't have a whole lot of prioritization on salary cap for higher end tight ends this week. There are definitely tight ends that I have in my pool and that I like, but in short formats, cash games, something like that, I don't mind spotting a 0 here from Irv Smith if I have to, if that means I can get names I like at every other position. So I definitely don't mind Irv Smith here. And one of the things really going Irv Smith's way, if you go back to that defense versus position tab in the rundfs.com VIP spreadsheet, if we look at points per game allowed to the tight end spot, the Falcons have allowed the most points per game to opposing tight ends with 7 touchdowns. So there might even be a backdoor case there for Kyle Rudolph. Let me move this back over here again. I keep accidentally showing the wrong tab, so I'll have to edit that in post here. So if you guys see a black screen, just know accidentally showed the wrong tab there on the spreadsheet. That's proprietary information to the paid subscribers. What do we got here? On the Atlanta side, Calvin Ridley's priced up with a quote-unquote healthy Julio back. Definitely both guys that can get there any given Sunday. But, man, Matt Ryan has looked really, really, really rough. And if you look at Matt Ryan's best 2 games this season, it's week 1 and week 2. The Seattle Seahawks have allowed the most passing yards in the league, and the Dallas Cowboys have allowed the most real points per game. So past that, when you put them against more medium defenses, Chicago, Green Bay, Carolina, it hasn't gone as well for him. Sure, you can asterisk it with Julio Jones being banged up. But if you're watching it, man, Matt Ryan is really not passing the eye test. And there's been 2 games here, the Bears and the Panthers, where he's had under 60% completion rate. So I'm a little bit skeptical of him, and I've actually found myself in some spots having some exposure to the Vikings defense, but that's more so a price play than anything else. And I also think you can make a tournament shot here on Todd Gurley, 6,300. The field to be spread out a little bit more now, and we know his snap counts and stuff like that not super, super high. But could we get 20 touches here? 14 carries last week, 5 targets. I think it's viable. He's going against a beatable Vikings run defense at 6,300. Man, if I get in the end zone with 100 all-purpose yards and a catch or two, wouldn't be the end of the world for me. So I don't have a lot of pristine high-level interest in the Falcons as a whole, but there are certainly players that make sense in a vacuum. And then, of course, I also want to mention Hayden Hurst, 4,700. I don't love the price here, but he's going to run a lot of routes here, and anytime Julio's on the field, it's going to distract the defense a little bit more. So Hayden Hurst, 6'6", 8 targets in his last 4 games. Definitely enough opportunity there. So if he fell in the end zone, he could be a 15 fantasy point play. So he'd be in the pool. He'd be in the mix. But I don't have a high level of confidence in Matt Ryan right now. Next game, the Redskins and the Giants. So this is a game where I actually have both defenses in the player pool. Redskins offensively, Ron Rivera's shaking stuff up. They've been really, really rough at the quarterback position, changing from Haskins to Kyle Allen, and then Kyle Allen gets injured and Alex Smith gets introduced into the game last week. If they can have a healthy Kyle Allen play the whole game here, maybe somebody who is really familiar with Ron Rivera's scheme playing for him in Carolina, maybe Redskins can get something going. Terry McLaurin's probably the first guy on the Redskins that I would be kind of looking at. He has been extremely involved throughout the mess that has been their offense this season. 7+ targets in every, or 7 or more targets in every game so far this season. Not breaking slates per se, but if 24-28 means anything to you guys in tournaments, for me it does at 5.7. I would have some shots here. I do respect the Giants' defense. I think both these defenses are better than a lot of people perceive. It's just because the public perception is so based on how bad the offenses are that you don't really think about their defense. But I think both defenses are better than a lot of people acknowledge. And then Logan Thomas, man, 3,300. I'm just at the slot machine at this point. You guys know the story, man. He's top 5, top 6 in routes, run, snap counts, routes run per quarterback, drop back, and all that good stuff. Last week, I was pretty encouraged. I was like, yeah, Kyle Allen's in the mix. We know he dotted to Ian Thomas or Greg Olsen if he had to. And I thought that was the week Logan Thomas would get involved. He caught 1 of 4 targets last week. I'll also say, last couple weeks defensively haven't been great matchups. So I'm personally going to have some exposure to Logan Thomas in deep field tournaments. But a lot of that might just be me at the slot machine refusing to get up and walk away. Because the metrics are there. The underlying metrics are there. And I'm going to go after it. But I will say this is probably the worst matchup on paper so far based on what we know. Statistically, if we look at how tight ends have done against the Giants, the Giants have been, top 6, top 7 matchup against opposing tight ends. But I guess at the same time, you can argue that they haven't really faced a lot of featured tight ends. Not that Logan Thomas is results-wise being featured. But, yeah, with both defenses in the mix. I also feel like Evan Ingram might get a little bit slept on from people that just look at the box scores. The Washington football team has allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. If you look at Evan Ingram's game log here at 4,900, it's easy to look at 2 targets last week and just kind of walk away. But you got to remember, man, Evan Ingram actually had a touchdown taken off the board last week. It was a fake field goal play, and I think they called illegal shift or illegal motion, something like that. And then, of course, Daniel Jones also had another touchdown picked off the board. So I feel like Evan Ingram isn't going to get the love or the traction that maybe the matchup says he should get. And he even had 2 end-around rushes last week. So 4,900 for Ingram. I'll put him in the pool for me. I'll definitely have exposure to him. I'm expecting more than 2 targets here. Matchup's a lot better. Yeah, so give me some Ingram. Then, of course, Slayton has a Q tag on him, dealing with a foot injury. We'll see if he lines up. If he didn't, maybe a couple more looks for Tate. Even more love for Evan Ingram. But I'm not going crazy with the offenses there. But I do think there's pieces in that game that maybe people are sleeping on. The Bears and the Panthers. Go look at the total for this game. This is one of those games that doesn't have a high total, but I actually like it. Like, there's a couple game totals here over 50 that I'm just, like, not in love with because I feel like it's so hard to predict. But this is one of those games, 44.5 total. It's really, really low. It's one of the lowest on the slate, but I like it because it has a high predictive value in usage. Concentrated player cores for both teams that will be part of the action. So I might have more of this game than maybe I should, but we'll start with the Bears side. First of all, David Montgomery has played over 80% of the snaps for the Bears at the running back position in the last 2 weeks since Tariq Cohen has been put on the IR. The Panthers have allowed the second most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs thus far this season, 563 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. Now, David Montgomery's not somebody that's going to impress us season-wise or statistically with yards per carry or anything like that. If you look at 2.9, 2.7, 3.2. But the matchup's there. The opportunity's there, 5,800. That's what we're looking for, the opportunity here. And I think even more so underrated right now is the targets for him. 8 and 6 targets the last 2 weeks. That's kind of the Tariq Cohen role. So if you're going to look at Montgomery here for a couple catches, that'll increase his floor for PPR. And if I can get at 5,800, if I can get a shot at 20 fantasy points, I'll take it. Matchup certainly pristine, so I like that. Sticking with the Bears side of things, man, I'm telling you, I'm not feeling it. Allen Robinson, he's 7K. You got to go up there and get him. But double-digit targets likely coming his way. So that's what I mean. Maybe they don't score a lot of points, but you probably know where those points are coming. And if we wanted to go even further, Jimmy Graham at 5K, 10 targets for him, and a bunch of red zone looks with 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games. So the Bears, I don't hate. On the Panthers side, it's not a great matchup on paper for Mike Davis if we're looking for just typical north-south, carry the football matchups. The Bears are right around a little bit below league average in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs, and they are they've allowed let's say 514 rushing yards on 113 carries, 4.5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. The thing with Mike Davis, man, is those targets, right? 7K for him. If he's gonna get 10 targets like he did last week against Atlanta, the floor is pretty high there, right? 5 catches for 50 yards. That's a 10-point floor. You tack on, 15 carries and then maybe a trip in the end zone. You got yourself a solid shot week to week at 20 fantasy points. That's 7K. I'll take that. I think if we're thinking about ownership leverage and like single entries and stuff like that, it looks like Alexander Madison is going to be extremely, extremely high owned. So Mike Davis is one of those guys right there at that price range that I could justify as a pivot, right? Even if he matched him, it makes sense. But man, there's still a range of outcomes that Davis could outscore Alexander Madison. So definitely like Mike Davis as somebody from the Panthers that I would have exposure to. And then Robbie Anderson, 12, 11, 5, 10 targets. The targets have been there for him. He's clicking just right with Teddy Bridgewater. 6,300. Give me 15 to 20 fantasy points, and I'm walking away a happy man. Let's move on to the next game real quick. The Texans and the Titans. Texans week 2 without Bill O'Brien taking on division rival Tennessee Titans. Total for this one is at 53. It opened at 55. So it's gone down 2 points. The Titans remaining a 3.5-point favorite. I'm sure you guys have heard it by now. It's a great spot for Derrick Henry. The Houston Texans have allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, while allowing the league high 706 yards rushing to opposing running backs with 6 touchdowns. So Derrick Henry, one of those games where he could have 25, 30 touches here. Look at his last couple games: 19, 26, 25, 31. He's not quite David Montgomery, David Montgomery-esque, but 3 3.5 yards per carry. You know how he likes to lull a defense to sleep and then, break a big one. 7,300, I'm looking for 25 to 30 fantasy points. There's definitely a range of outcomes that he doesn't get there. In a similar spot a couple weeks ago, he was extremely, extremely high owned. I think it was the Jaguars game. 25 carries, 2 targets, so he had 27 touches against a Jags team in which the Titans scored 33 real points on, and he just didn't get into the end zone. He didn't even break double-digit real points. So there is, much like Madison, a range of outcomes for Henry to be fadeable and game theory ownership leverage out of some single entries. And I've actually built a couple of lineups that feature 5-6K running backs, right? The David Montgomerys, the James Robinsons, guys like that, that kind of push out the higher end chalk guys like Henry, Madison, and that gives me money to maybe explore some more high end target guys like Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen, guys like that in the receiver spot. So I definitely like building lineups backwards to the field today because there's so many plausible avenues there. So the case for Henry is self-explanatory. I also think there's a case for A.J. Brown, 5,600 for him. Targets 9 and 8 targets in the 2 games that he's played. Remember, he's missed a big chunk of the season. Should thrive just fine here. And then I also like Jonnu Smith as a pass catcher for the Titans. And then Ryan Tannehill, maybe to hedge some of my Derrick Henry exposure. Tannehill is one of those that is very likely to throw under 30 times today, but he's been extremely efficient and he's been extremely, extremely touchdown dependent, but also he's getting touchdowns, right? 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns in a couple games here where he's exceeded 20 fantasy points. I do like Ryan Fitzpatrick more at this price just because he's a little bit more consistent, but if I was heavily invested in Derrick Henry today, I probably would have a couple of lineups that explore the what if Henry didn't get the touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill probably does, right? On the other side of that game, Houston looked a little bit rejuvenated without Bill O'Brien there. Bill O'Brien kind of reminds me of what Adam Gase is doing, man. It's just such a cancer to the organization. Without Bill O'Brien against a Jaguars team, we saw Deshaun Watson touch almost 30 fantasy points, 3 touchdown passes. He did turn the ball over twice, but we like him. We like the handcuff to Will Fuller. Will Fuller got 8 targets last week, got in the end zone. And then it was Brandon Cooks is on this team game. 12 targets for him in the first game without Bill O'Brien. I'm not going to say that's going to be the standard going forward, but it's certainly encouraging to know that Brandon Cooks can be part of that. And then that gives you a 3-headed monster for Texan stacks. Matter of fact, I think in my player group, I actually have 4 because I also have David Johnson in the mix. If we look at David Johnson last week, 5,400 for him. He had 17 carries, 4 targets, so an opportunity at 20 touches. And he's going against a Titans defense that I think he can get off in. I think David Johnson was 4 rushing yards and a touchdown away from being an elite play last week, right? 96 rushing yards, didn't get in the end zone. Think about that. If he gets 4 more rushing yards, that's a 3-point bonus. That puts him at 15, and a touchdown would put him at 22. So that's how close, in a game of inches, that's how close David Johnson was to being an elite play. And I think one of these weeks is going to hit. And the Tennessee Titans, certainly a team that have been giving up points. And I think that's one of the things that's just kind of underrated about the Titans. They're getting in some shootouts, but yeah. Is that it about I mentioned Jonnu Smith, right? Yeah, Jonnu Smith's the other guy from this game that I don't hate getting behind. I don't have any exposure to either defense. Moving forward, next game, the Browns and the Steelers. So the Browns, I'm going to show you something. This is a banged-up, sick team, man. Baker Mayfield looks like he's going to play with chest and rib injury. We already know that Nick Chubb's on the IR. Odell Beckham is expected to play through an illness, and Jarvis Landry is going to play through a hip and rib injury, and they're going against a very physical Steelers defense. And then, of course, Kareem Hunt not in a fantastic spot, but could get there. And this is just a spot where I'm a little bit underwhelmed with the range of outcomes for the Browns to really pop off. They have an implied total of 23.75. It's a 51-point total. I'm really low on the Browns here. I just don't want one hit to ruin my day. This has been an injury-riddled season for a lot of fantasy teams this year, and this one definitely looks like it could be one big hit away from putting one of those guys on the side. So I do like some Steelers side here. Really just chase Claypool. Without Deontay Johnson, Claypool was heavily involved. And if you look at his route tree, it wasn't fluky. Very, very involved in the 2 games without, a couple games without Deontay Johnson. He's been high snap counts. Last week, 11 targets. Might have been a little on the high side, but I certainly think that we should expect his involvement to be enough at 5,200 to be invested against the Browns team. So I like Chase Claypool as somebody. I think I have him in my cash game lineup right now. And then if you wanted to take a shot on one of the defenses here, probably the Steelers. I wouldn't talk you off of that. I don't really have much exposure to anything else in this game. Moving on to Denver and New England. I don't have anything from this game right now. I just feel like there's not anything for me to want. 45 is our OU. The Patriots are getting Cam Newton and Stephon Gilmore back. The Broncos are limping into this game. It's a road team. Bill Belichick is going to make it hard for anybody going into Foxborough. So I'm not messing with the Broncos, and I think the Broncos are a team that we have to watch. Melvin Gordon out. Noah Fant out. I mean, this is a practice squad limping into one of the toughest road venues against one of the sharpest minds. So no exposure to the Broncos for me today. And then you got to remember the Patriots did get James White back in the mix with Cam Newton there. This is going to be a team that runs the ball more than most teams in the league. This picture of Cam Newton's ridiculous, by the way. 6,500, I think if you thought Cam Newton could get you 20 plus, right? Maybe a touchdown or two. I think that's very plausible. So I don't hate the idea of Cam Newton. He didn't practice much this week. I don't think he practiced much last week either. But he is expected to be the starter today. But I just don't have much. If I wanted to target a pass catcher, I do think you can make a case for like Demir Bird at 3,500. He saw 10 targets this last game against Kansas City. He plays a lot of snaps. He's really cheap. If he got in the end zone on 5 catches or something like that, I think he'd pay off. But I don't have much from this game on either side. Moving on to the Jets and the Giants, man. The Jets and the Dolphins. I don't know if I would ever anticipate a scenario prior to the season where the Dolphins would be 10-point favorites. But here we are, man. 10-point home favorites, the Dolphins, minus 10, 47 total. The Jets are just in shambles. I talked about Bill O'Brien. Adam Gase is doing the same thing from a public perception, at least in my opinion, to this Jets organization that we saw O'Brien do to the Texans this past week, allowing Le'Veon Bell to walk away. We know their off-seasons moves with Jamal Adams and stuff like that have been widely documented. I do have a big interest in Jamison Crowder. I actually have, I think right now he's one of my highest owned receivers in all of my entries. 10 targets or more in each game that he's played this season. For PPR, that dog will hunt for me. If he gets in the end zone, that's just extra. 27, 20, 28 DKP. I just think that especially if you're buying into this game script where they're minus 10 dogs, I mean, they should just be throwing the ball. And then PPR, he probably gets there and can probably muscle his way to a 100-yard bonus. So James Crowder probably my highest owned player, if I'm being real honest at this point. And then on the Dolphins side, is it weird to handcuff Ryan Fitzpatrick to Jamison Crowder? Because, man, there's not a Dolphins player that I just feel super confident about handcuffing with Fitzpatrick. If I really, really had to marry myself to one guy, it'd probably be Devontae Parker. Just 3 targets last week in a game where the Dolphins traveled to the West Coast and put up 43 points. But the targets just seem to be staggered week to week, right? Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, Isaiah Ford. excuse me, Mike Gesicki, and even Myles Gaskin. So I don't have one particular handcuff to Ryan Fitzpatrick that I'm locking in. But I definitely think they all make some sense in a vacuum. But Devontae Parker would be the guy. But let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick here. He's 5,900. He's sub 6K. I've contemplated between him and Stafford in cash all day. Not necessarily because I'm worried about Stafford, but man, Fitzpatrick, outside of week 1 on the road at New England, where Bill Belichick has had all offseason to think about you, he has been really, really consistent. 25-plus fantasy points each game. Some games where you have to score and you're trailing. But then like last week, right, they're up quite a bit against Jacksonville. They lapped them in points. So I just really think it makes a lot of sense. And another thing going his way today is that the Jets are kind of a funnel defense. If you look at rushing yards allowed on the season, the Jets have been, well, I guess the Jets are a little bit higher, but I think DVOA-wise, the Jets rank better. So if you're going to get off against the Jets, it makes more sense to throw against them. So I just really think it's a strong spot for Ryan Fitzpatrick. I keep clicking the wrong screen. Got to make another note to black that out. So yeah, I actually don't hate the idea of like Fitzpatrick and Crowder in cash, which is such a weird place to be, but here we are. And then lastly, the Packers and the Buccaneers. This game has a really, really juicy total, and I think it has a wide range of outcomes. It's 55.5 is our total. It's actually gone up since it opened. I think a lot of that's based on the fact that we know Devontae Adams is back. The Packers have been coasting. The Packers went from -1.5 to just -1. I don't know. It's a full strength Buccaneers team. I think the Bucs are pretty spread out pre-flop. The first two guys that we look at, I think Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, but neither one of those guys are somebody that I'm going to lock into like my cash games or anything. I just feel like there's so many ways that game could go. But on the Packers side, Devontae Adams, matchup-wise, not great, but, I mean, Adams and Rodgers have been tossing bad matchups out the window for a long time. This is a guy that could get 15-plus targets and just get there. 25, 30 fantasy points, not out of the realm of possibilities. But at 8K, you kind of need that. So yeah. Robert Tonyan is extremely, extremely ridiculously priced on FanDuel. I believe he was the second highest priced tight end. I can't see myself justifying that, but now that I've said that, he'll probably have 4 touchdowns today, right? But I definitely think Rodgers to Adams handcuffs make sense. Aaron Jones, not a great spot for him as the essentially the most expensive priced active running back on the slate. Can easily make cases against him matchup-wise. If we look at rushing yards allowed, the Bucs have allowed the second fewest rushing yards, so this should really funnel some of the work to the air. I also think the Bucs have been pretty successful defensively by making some big plays, sacks, and turnovers and stuff like that. We don't see that. The Rodgers doesn't get sacked much, and I don't think he's had a turnover yet. He has 0 interceptions, no fumbles. So this could be one of those spots where he neutralizes the strengths of the Buccaneers defense. But definitely a game that's hard to call pre-flop. I think the obvious pieces would be Adams, Godwin, and Evans, and then past that, we're just kind of taking darts and dabs. And I just don't love anyone in a vacuum at their price, knowing that the range of outcomes is very volatile. So anyway, that's my quick look at today's slate, man. I hope I kind of helps you get on the same page as I'm at. If you guys want full access to my game notes, they are in the RunDFS.com VIP spreadsheet, my player pool, all the good stuff. Just go to RunDFS.com, get yourself a week pass. And if you don't mind, hit that thumbs up for me before you head out. Twitter.com/GundeckerSports, where you can find me. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And I hope you guys crush it today. Good luck. God bless. Go win some money.